Do the Clippers have too much depth? Is there even such a thing as too much depth? I'm going to be talking about that and if it could become a potential issue for the Clippers on today's Locked On Clippers. Sheesh.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, 18 years a Clipper fan, Darian Vaziri. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. I have my own podcast where I talk LA sports, especially Clipper games after they happen. And of course, game day vlogs when I attend sporting events and extra content on the NBA at large and its history. So check that out if you're into it. For today's episode, I'm going to be talking about one of the issues, or should I say potential issues, that I feel like I've kind of taken from seeing the Clippers roster and seeing the first two preseason games. The Clips have so much depth that it makes me wonder, do we have too much depth? To the point where will we be able to see the best versions of a lot of these guys? And when I say the best versions, I don't mean a guy like Reggie Jackson scoring 20 a game. I don't mean John Wall playing like Washington John Wall. I mean their best versions of what the Clippers need in order to be a championship team. And there's a reason I bring this issue up, or potential issue up, because there are a lot of guys that like the ball, want the ball, and need the ball to be successful to some degree. And obviously, guys like Reggie Jackson, Norman Powell, even John Wall, per se, are going to be used as catch and shoot guys for large portions of the season. John Wall probably not as much as Norman Powell and Reggie Jackson because he's one of our best on-ball creators that we've signed, or the best on-ball creator that we've signed, but one of the best on the team now after we've signed him. The thing is, will there be enough possessions and touches to go around for all these guys to get in a rhythm? So the reason I bring this up, first I want to name some specific examples of teams that I felt had too much depth that actually ended up hurting them. And one of them was the 2019 Boston Celtics. So I lived in Massachusetts at this time, and I got to see this team, and they had a lot of expectations heading into this season that they were going to win the championship, go to the championship, because they had just made it to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and now you were adding Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward back to the mix. But what ended up happening was there were too many cooks in the kitchen, all that wanted to or were able to create offense in pick and roll or in isolation. And whatever ended up happening was in the beginning of the season, they were kind of deferring to each other too much. It was like, no, I'm not trying to go create, you create. I don't want to step on your toes, you create. And as a result, nobody was getting any big games. They were losing to teams that they should not have been losing to. And it seemed like nobody was getting any rhythm. And then Brad Stevens made a bunch of changes throughout the season. Marcus Morris Sr. started starting. Jaylen Brown moved to the bench. And yeah, it's funny to think back that Jaylen Brown, the guy who's the second best player on the Celtics now, part of the Jays tandem with Jason Tatum that just went to the championship, was sitting on the bench 3 years ago in that season for a lot of games. And you just saw that they just never found their cohesiveness. However, that Celtics team is not like this Clippers team because the difference is they did not seem to really like each other. There was a lot of internal conflict. Now, speaking of the Clippers liking each other, yesterday they just held an open practice at the Galen Center, USC's basketball stadium. I was not able to attend, but the vibes looked so good. And that's one thing I've alluded to on this podcast a lot is the chemistry on and off the court of this Clipper team is so high that when it comes to this too much depth thing I'm about to talk about, I feel like the Clipper players are going to have a much easier time sacrificing and not stepping on each other's toes because they won't be prioritizing individual stardom and individual attention over the team goal. And you could see how the vibes were high. John Wall hitting his Dougie just like the good old days. It was great. Kawhi was smiling. Fans were into it. So it was really good stuff. But when we talk about too much depth, another team or teams that I think fell into this trap were our very own Clipper teams of 2020 and 2021. Now I'm going to talk 2020 first. The biggest reason why the Clippers were favored to win that championship going into the season was because they had Kawhi Leonard and Paul George added to a team that had 2 Six-Man of the Year leading candidates. And with Paul George having missed a good amount of games in that first season, 24 to be exact, Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams both were able to step up and do their normal things in the regular season, which were huge and provided the Clippers with that scoring punch they needed off the bench to make up for Paul George's absences. And that's why the Clippers ended up getting the 2 seed, even though they never really felt like they really hit stride all season long. So that was that, right? But what you saw in the playoffs, and of course, again, please take my comments on the 2020 season with a grain of salt. I think the 2021 season is a better example. But obviously the bubble was a weird, unforeseen circumstance that we've never seen before in the history of basketball. But what you saw there was Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams, to get the best versions of them, and you can also say this about Reggie Jackson too, they need some touches. They need some shots up to get rhythm. And that's the case for most players at any level of basketball. You need some shots up. You need some touches to get rhythm. It's very hard. Certain guys can do it, can get away with just barely touching the ball and spotting up and shooting right away and being in a rhythm that way because they're not used to putting the ball on the floor that much or holding the ball for that long. They're spot-up shooters and they're specialists, and that's what they do. But there are guys like Reggie Jackson and even Lou Williams who can make things happen off the bounce and have some juice off the bounce. And sometimes those guys, to make more spot-up shots, need some touches, need some isolations here and there. And what you saw with Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell was that when they didn't get the amount of minutes that they were accustomed to, it was much harder for them to get their shot making going. And then their defensive deficiencies stuck out even more. And then it was like, what was good about having that depth? You played them all season, but their games weren't translatable to the playoffs. So I think, honestly, in 2020, it was less of a too much depth issue, but more of the personnel wasn't built for the playoffs kind of issue. But the depth of the Clipper team didn't actually help them in the playoffs. Now, fast forward to 2021. That was an issue because the Clippers had Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard, Terrence Mann, and Lou Williams to start the season. And Lou Williams, obviously having that tenure or seniority, was definitely prioritized over guys like Luke Kennard and Terrence Mann. And because of that, and of course the Clippers still had Patrick Beverley at the time. He was injured, and that's why Reggie Jackson ended up starting. But what you saw was in the beginning of the season, Ty Lue was figuring out, okay, who do I play consistently? I want to play Luke Kennard, but I have a short leash with him. If he doesn't shoot shots when he's in the game, then I'm going to take him out and give him like no minutes. Terrence Mann was not getting the minutes that he gets now or got last season at all in the 2021 regular season. And I was calling for him to play ever since the bubble. I really was. And he was getting DNPs all the way into February. DNPs. That stands for did not play. On February 2nd, 2021 against the Brooklyn Nets. And mind you, the reason why is because that was a marquee matchup on TNT against the Nets with Harden, Kyrie, and Durant all playing. And he did not play at all. And it's funny that we mentioned that he didn't play at all because he's literally the Clippers' best perimeter defender or one of the best. So for him not to have played against the Nets just shows how little he was being prioritized at the time because the Clippers had too much depth. And Luke Kennard, same goes for him. He was getting DNPs not just in the regular season, even after Lou Williams was traded. He was getting DNPs in the first 3 games of the playoffs. He only got 4 minutes in Game 4 against Dallas, and in Game 5, he didn't even play. Fast forward to Game 7, he had 11 points and was a big reason why the Clippers made that push to gain separation in the second half. So, I like it when the team has depth, yes, but depth, not too much depth so you don't know who's playing. You want to know who's playing when everyone's healthy, and you want guys to get a rhythm and not have to worry about, oh, this guy does what I do, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do what I do to the best of my ability. And why am I mentioning this? Why is this even an issue going into this upcoming season? because it feels like the Clippers' skill sets and guys are a lot more diverse than having Lou Williams, Reggie Jackson, two creators, and then you throw in Luke Kennard at the guard spot. I'm going to talk about why I saw potential signs of the reason I'm even bringing this conversation up. And I'm not saying that it's going to be an issue. I'm just pointing out that it may be. Maybe. I'm going to talk about that coming up. The LA Clippers are minus 115, both for the over and the under, for 52.5 wins in the regular season this year. If I were you, I would bet on that over, because this year the Clippers are going to get 60 wins for the first time in franchise history. You've heard it here first on Locked On Clippers. And to bet, you got to go to betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your football and basketball betting info this season. It's where you can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find across every sport. The MLB playoffs are coming up and starting this weekend, so make sure to place your bets on those teams, various teams, including my Dodgers, who are favorite to win the World Series as of now. And of course, the World Cup is coming up in November. Make sure you place those bets. They're going to be flying all over the place. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events on BetOnline. Just head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so here were the things I saw in the preseason game that made me even bring this conversation up. Because I was thinking this in the sense that I've mentioned too much depth being an issue where Luke Kennard, for example, doesn't really play when everyone's healthy. Now, I know what you're thinking. People are going to sit games. There's going to be load management. There are going to be injuries. Everyone's going to play. That's not what I'm concerned about, fellas. I'm not concerned about the regular season distribution. I think everyone's going to play a solid amount. I think what's going to be tough is when everyone's healthy, who sits out. Because that's going to make them think, am I not getting playoff attention? Am I not getting the playing time that I want in the playoffs? So that's a question for me. I just want guys like Luke Kennard. I really only see it as Luke Kennard being the one that gets less minutes, because John Wall, Norman Powell, and Terrence Mann and Marcus Morris and Robert Covington are going to play. And Nico Batum, they're going to play. So it's really Luke Kennard, I think, that's going to be sacrificed, as I've said many times. And I think his shooting is so invaluable. I mean, you saw the game against Maccabi. He was lights out. And then the one shot he took against Portland, he made it. So I just hope that he can stay in rhythm. Now, when I mentioned earlier, one of the guys that can just catch the ball and shoot without even putting it on the floor and stay in rhythm, Luke Kennard is one of those guys. So in terms of when he's on the court, I don't think a lack of touches is going to hurt him at all. But three guys that I think it could be a thing for: Reggie Jackson, John Wall, Norman Powell. Here's why I say that. I noticed in the second unit that John Wall was handling the ball a lot. And in the second unit, off the bench, when you have, let's say, Terrence Mann, Nico Batum, and Robert Covington out there, there's really only two guys that create shots for themselves and other players. That's John Wall and Norman Powell. So I would like a nice split there, but I noticed that because John Wall was kind of running pick and roll every time, Norman Powell was pressing when he got the ball. And when I mean pressing, I mean shooting every time he touched it, looking to score every time, not really being patient. And he was 1 for 11. Now, I didn't have much of a problem with the shots he was taking, because Norman Powell's a tough shot maker. He's going to make tough shots, and he's a scorer, he's an attacker. He's a slasher. But I don't want him feeling like he needs to touch the ball. He needs to score every time he gets it. But the only reason why I think he feels that way is because he doesn't know how much he's going to get the ball, and I don't think he wants to become a spot-up shooter. That's the thing. People say, he's going to get so many more open looks because of this guy's attention and this and that. The thing is, a lot of these guys aren't used to being spot-up shooters all the time. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't apply for Norman. Norman has done both. But I feel like Norman wants touches on the ball as well. He wants to develop his playmaking ability as well, and doesn't want to be put in a box and be solely a spot-up shooter. And I think that balance is what's going to be what the Clippers need to navigate, and what the floor generals like John Wall and even Paul George and Kawhi Leonard at times need to try to balance. Because I know John Wall wants to prove himself. He really does want to prove himself, that he's still that dude, that he's still a great player. But Norman Powell, he just came off a 19 points per game season. on extremely efficient shooting. So, and a lot of people have said that he's going to be the third best player on the team. A lot of Clipper fans think that John Wall is going to be the third best player on the team. Point is, they each have their individual goals. Now, John Wall seems like he's all in about the team, and I believe him. But he also has a point to prove. And we also know that if John Wall gets even close to his best, he will probably be the third best player on the Clippers. Norman Powell, what concerns me there is that he said that he wants to be an all-star. And he said that he wants to become the starting shooting guard for the Clippers. And to do that, he's going to look to impress. And that's when I made the comment in a couple pods ago that I don't want his individual goals to get in the way of the team concept. And 1 for 11 it's preseason, so you can't take too many conclusions from it. But 1 for 11 in the preseason game, he was pressing a little bit. I just want him to stay in his lane because as great of a player as he is, you don't want Norman Powell taking too many shots away from Kawhi, Paul George, and the rest. And John Wall, the same way he's handling the ball every time, I don't want him taken away from Norman Powell, so he feels like he needs to do that. So it's a nice balance for those two. As for Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris, you can also say, Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson are absolutely rhythm guys. They need some touches. They need some shots. They need to be able to do their thing a little bit. And that's kind of why I wanted Marcus Morris Sr. coming off the bench. However, he is pretty good starting games, especially and Paul and Kawhi are going to give him some open looks to start the game. That's what you know. Reggie Jackson, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated because he is catch and shoot ready, Reggie, and great when he's catching and shooting. I mean, you saw the 2021 season. We got the best version of Reggie Jackson because he was catching and shooting, and then he got the confidence to pull up for game winners like you saw at Detroit, and then in the playoffs just went on a tear. And that came from the confidence he got from catching and shooting and getting easy looks. But at the same time, we're also a year removed from that. Reggie Jackson has now become a cult hero in Clipper Nation. He gets his name chanted at every game. And last season, he was the main creator and source of offense for the Clippers, outside when Paul George was hurt. So even though he's not going to be close to that this season, and maybe lower in the pecking order in a lot of ways, I still think Kawhi and Paul George need to give him some occasional pick and rolls for him to handle the ball and isolate against mismatches and whatnot, because that will get him more engaged, and that'll get him more confident to make not just open catch and shoot threes, but those shots that make you go, Reg, what are you doing? Oh! Because he does that. He's the king of that, where I'll be like, Reggie, what are you doing? And he'll make a shot that'll shock you and totally turn the momentum of the game. And I feel like to do that, the Clippers need to keep him in rhythm. It's all about rhythm, and I think that's the main thing about a point guard, a true point guard. It's not, see, I think people get it twisted, and this may be my definition, you might disagree. People think that a point guard's number one job is to get guys good looks. I think first and foremost, before that, it's how do you get the most out of every individual player. Not every single player just thrives on open shots. Some of them need to work a little bit, one-on-one, to make those open shots. Because some guys don't like being put in a box and aren't comfortable with being a spot-up shooter. This is a stupid comparison. But I remember when I was playing intramurals in college, I was always a point guard growing up. And I remember I was the best three-point shooter on my team, or first or second. So I got moved. I was like, you know what? I'll sacrifice and go play off the ball. And I became kind of a catch-and-shoot guy and started falling in love with that catch-and-shoot three. But I started losing rhythm and going cold. And I know, yeah, I'm not an NBA player, but it's all relative because I've seen it happen to NBA players. So it's just a balance of keeping guys in rhythm and sharing the wealth. And it's going to be interesting to see the Clippers navigate that. And that's why I hope that not having too many creators comes back to bite them. I hope it doesn't, I should say. But coming up, I am going to be talking about the main thing I'm looking forward to in this weekend's preseason game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. We'll be talking about it coming up. Okay, to close it out, the Clippers have a preseason game this weekend against the Minnesota Timberwolves. You already know a Monday pod is going to be up after that game. It'll probably be the first look we get at Rudy Gobert, our old friend, wearing a Minnesota Timberwolves uniform. And it's also John Wall's starting, or should I say, it's John Wall's first game starting for the Clippers, kind of getting an audition to see what Ty Lue likes more. And again, going back to that conversation I just had, or what I just said about rhythm and John Wall handling the ball a lot, I really hope that if John Wall starts, and this is kind of my fear of John Wall starting, is he wants to handle the ball a lot, and I don't want him taking the ball away from Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Because here's the thing, you might say, well, he's going to make their job easier. Not necessarily every time. I absolutely think John Wall is going to find Kawhi and Paul George for a ton of open looks this season and give them the ball in their spots. But John Wall handling the ball in pick and roll, if teams switch that, and he tries to go isolation as opposed to Kawhi and Paul George, I don't necessarily prefer that. Obviously, it's matchup dependent who's switched out onto him, but I still want Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as our primary ball handlers in the first unit, or just in general. So that's why I think John Wall can cook more in that second unit. But we're going to see how he sacrifices or how he does it this weekend. The thing is, John, again, I'm going to keep saying it, is eager to prove himself. I don't want him trying to come out and just act like old Wizards John Wall and make Kawhi and Paul George kind of feed off of him and show them, hey, look, guys, look how much easier I can make their jobs. But it's kind of taking away from how great the team can be, because I really think Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have improved tremendously as playmakers and ball handlers, and I want to see them continue to improve on that. But I'm interested to see what John Wall's got. And one of the main things I also want to see is hopefully some more minutes for Paul George, because he looked so good the other day that you just want to see him keep playing, because whoo-wee. I mean, he's been saying he's the most focused he's ever been. He's locked in. He's so focused on winning the championship. He's in great shape. And oh boy, he looks it so far. He looks the part. And as I said before, I think Paul George is going to be the Clippers' best player for the first 20 to 30 games, because Kawhi is going to be working his way back, getting his legs underneath him. And it's going to be nice to see Kawhi Leonard play again. It's just like processing the fact that Kawhi is back is just so awesome. But yeah, super excited for the game. A couple Clipper players got cut, so hopefully we'll see more of Moussa Diabate and also some more of Moses Brown, just to see him continue to play against NBA competition and see how he does. It'll be interesting also to see the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that Clippers could very well play in the playoffs if things work out. And also the team, even though they didn't have Rudy Gobert and they did have Patrick Beverley, the team that beat the Clippers in the play-in game, that eventually was half the reason they didn't make the playoffs. So I hope it's the preseason game, so you don't expect the Clippers to come out with a vengeance or looking for revenge or anything of that nature. But we'll see. Also, I don't know about Luke Kennard's status. I heard he tweaked his ankle, but I don't think it's that serious. It'll be nice to see him play on Sunday as well. And then Marcus Morris Sr. just had a kid. Shout out to Marcus Morris Sr. Hopefully he's back as well. But if he's not, again, it's just preseason. It's not a big deal. We just want to see how the team looks, how the guys look, how Kawhi looks, and what lineups seem to work, what gives Ty Lue the idea that, hey, this could be lethal come regular season. And that's what we're going to be experimenting with. So it's going to be fun. I want you guys to answer the question for today's show on our YouTube channel, because it's the fastest way to grow the show. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Clippers YouTube. We're trying to get to 800 subscribers. Let me know, do the Clippers have too much depth, and can it become an issue down the line? So if I'm saying the counter argument of that, nah, you're going to need these bodies for the long haul. And as the season progresses, Ty Lue will figure out if something's redundant or if something is too much. And I believe that. I truly do, because it's not his first rodeo. It's his fourth with the Clippers. I think he'll figure it out. Do I think it'll be too much depth will be a problem? Not really. I think in the beginning of the season, we could see guys trying to bite off more than they can chew. And some guys, I want to warn you guys, though. If some guys start out slow because they're not getting the same touches or normal amount of shots they normally get, and you're saying, what happened to Reggie Jackson? What happened to Marcus Morris? He sucks now. What happened to Norman Powell? That's not random. A guy just doesn't end up sucking like that. Rhythm is big, even at the NBA level. So keep that in mind, guys, that some players could start out a little bit cold, depending on just getting used to all these new players coming in that want to do things and are extremely talented. Norman Powell, John Wall, for example. So let me know, do the Clippers have too much depth, and do you think it could be an issue? Answer that in the comment section. Again, I'm Darian Vaziri, your host. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dime Dropper. I'm releasing an episode today on youth sports with a mentor of mine. But if you want to look for Clipper content all season, you also got to subscribe to Dime Dropper. It's the rawest, clearest look at the Clippers from a diehard fan every day, or damn near every day, post-game, at games, you name it. Thanks for joining me, guys. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Remember to keep giving me constructive criticism. And always, remember the key phrase of the day. Go Clippers.